right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Heavy Hour Podcast. Currently, it is about 60 degrees here in New York, unseasonably cold for this time of year. Today's episode, I think I should probably get right into it. Today's a bit different because we're not interviewing a heavy main. We're going to be interviewing a pyro main. Yeah, I know. This is a pyro main with about 600 hours in the class, and only about 150 in heavy. Of course, I believe that on the Heavy Hour podcast, we should get opposing points of view too. Not just heavy main should have their voice heard, but also those who don't usually regard heavy in the highest. Of course, one of the most important things to know about heavy is that not everyone's destined to play heavy. Some people are destined to play other classes, and some people often choose to play those classes, although they do often dabble in heavy so often. Here we have with us today someone who is a pyro main. His name is Concord. Welcome to the Heavy Hour Podcast, Concord.
Thank you.
All right. So briefly, of course, introduce yourself to our audience here.
So, I technically began my experience with TF2 back in 2015 Christmas. That's when we got an actual decent PC that could run it. Although at the time I didn't play it very much. I experimented with a lot of classes, but most of what I played were Engineer, Heavy, and Pyro. However, off and on, dropped it, picked it back up until about 2019. And then that's when my brother said you should get back into it. I said, okay. I was a scout main, a sniper main, a heavy main for like 20, 30, 40 hours, and then came back to Pyro. And ever since then, I have put the majority of my playtime in all classes, in casual, competitive, and funny servers, as well as practicing on Pyro. I have well over 500 on Pyro, approaching 600, and mostly haven't regretted any of it.
Okay. So you said you played Pyro for, since about 2021, you said? I'm sorry, I couldn't quite catch you, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I've been playing Pyro since late 2019 consistently.
2019, okay. Okay, so when was the last time you touched heavy, if I might ask?
Well, when was the last time I played TF2? June 4th.
When was the last time you touched heavy as a class?
June 4th.
So you played heavy in June. All right. So last time you played TF2, you played heavy. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So, in detail, this is going to be a bit of a big one. Why do you choose to play your main other than heavy as a class? And is it due to the strengths of Pyro or the weaknesses of heavy? So, if you want, you can go ahead and go on a tangent about it. And in fact, that's actually kind of what I'm intending, but it's fine.
Okay. All right. Well, just so happens I'm pretty good at those. So, heavy, whenever I started playing TF2, I always liked heavy. But at the same time, that's me playing a specific class. There's, in any game I play, let's just start here. In any game I play, I have a certain few things I like to do more than others. However, once I get used to the game and I play with those for a while, not necessarily getting bored of playing that way, I like to experiment. I'm just a variety person. That's just how I like to do things. So when I came to TF2 and I experimented with a lot of other classes, I found one that kind of pulled me in after playing a couple that attracted me first, and that was Pyro. Heavy kind of stayed up there in my playtime simply because of he's a mechanically very simple class, but he's deceptively simple, and also complex at the same time. It's very odd. Pyro's the same way, but in a different way. And what attracted me about Pyro is, first of all, how funny the class is. A lot of people have contention about the Jungle Inferno update, and that Heavy needed it more. I disagree. However, Heavy could have benefited from it. I think Pyro got the better end of the deal, even though Heavy still went away with the banana, which is, awesome. So, Pyro pulled me in because of his little quirky mechanics, the deceptive simplicity yet depth of the class in different ways. And yes, I understand every class has a lot of depth. I'm not saying Pyro is more than others, but I digress. And then once I got to playing Pyro a decent bit, that pulled me into stuff like competitive, which I have 2.5 seasons on. Pretty fun. Might go back at some point. And then I got playing heavy a lot more once I got into playing competitive, because I learned it while playing competitive, and I know you have some competitive experience as well, that Pyro and Heavy have a lot of different jobs they do. However, Pyro is oftentimes leashed a lot more, like you would leash a dog. And so I wasn't as much because our medic wasn't an absolute doofus, but that's generally how a lot of Pyros play, and that's how I played at first. However, Heavy attracted me, one, because in competitive as well as just in more serious casual games, which I learned when to be serious and when not to be. I'm not that guy that kills friendlies, except on accident. So I liked how the overlap was with Heavy and other classes in the job description. So Heavy he's the only other class besides, technically speaking, Medic and Engineer that can heal other classes on demand. Because, you have the Conch or something like that, or the Mad Milk, but that requires input from the other player. Heavy has a direct line of impact on things like healing other players, tanking damage, being a distraction, although every class can do that, doing damage. Of course, the Brass Beast has the highest DPS on a single target in the game. So, Heavy has a lot of things going for him. He has a lot of things going against him, but he has a lot of things going for him that is strange for a Pyro player to want to pull towards, because Pyro is, people think of Soldier as the most generalist class in the game. And I would say generally applicable to all applications, no. Generally effective, yes. Pyro is technically, by definition, more of a generalist than Soldier is, because Pyro is able to fulfill simply more jobs than any other class, most likely. I could be wrong. And that doesn't mean he does them well, it just means he can. That's what pulled me to Pyro initially. However, I put 570-something hours into Pyro, so I don't always want to play Pyro anymore. So I find myself very frequently playing Heavy and casual, and if I do happen to go back to competitive, I will likely play Heavy. Heavy, as far as cosmetics, I like his cosmetics. His weapon selection, while they are very similar to each other, they do slightly different things that I like to change my playstyle to work around. But if you need to, you can revert to just standard Heavy playstyle, and I like that. Heavy is a very consistent class where the variation comes by the decision of the player, not by necessarily the equipment you're using. And that's kind of my idea on the depth of both those classes and why they pull me towards them.
That is okay. Wow, I will say that is a lot to process. I like that. A lot of very good points you made there. Exactly though, but exactly why did you choose Pyro over? What does Pyro have that Heavy does not? I feel like I'm sort of missing that.
No, it's fine. I did go on a tangent. I may have not outlined it properly. So, Pyro pulls me towards him because, again, he's simple. He is a simple class. You tell a new player to pick up Pyro, that's where the WM1 thing comes from. It's fine. It works. It tells you what you need to do. The game tells you deceptively that you just need to walk at people, press M1. Okay, fine. And I still do that. People get on Pyro for doing it because it takes no skill. Well, I reference Soldier, but anyway.
Okay, yeah, the Soldier reference, I understand.
So, but Pyro pulls me... Sorry, continue.
So you're saying it's because you think it's simple in your terms, which is fair enough.
Well, yeah, and look, Pyro is easy to understand. I'm not saying WM1 is this overtly hard thing to do consistently, unless you're saying to live, which of course, any class that's hard to do. So, but what pulled me to Pyro is simplicity as well as general applicability. I like the ability to just press the 3 key on class select and just be able to do a range of different things. I learned later Plus, I like the mix and match equipment sets with Pyro because he has a lot more generally applicable items. But doing that for so long, of course, it left me yearning for something. And I still play Pyro. I still play him a lot. But I don't pick him almost every game anymore. I used to be that guy that would just equip the degreaser, the flare gun, and the extinguisher for like 200 hours. And good lord, I almost can't use those weapons anymore, except for the flare gun. I love the flare gun.
Yeah, very good weapon.
But
I should actually use it a bit more. I'm not a Pyro main, I'm a heavy main. But I've been playing Pyro to the side, just, for funsies.
Mm-hmm. And on the deceptive depth part, just like with heavy, philosophically, Pyro's different. Pyro relies on a lot of precision mechanics to make up for his lack of damage. So the whole idea behind his flamethrower is you trade upfront damage for consistent DOT in your direct flame damage and afterburn. That's a fair trade, but in TF2, where you have to fight against every other class that doesn't have to do that, or heavy, who makes up for that in his super high HP and raw damage, it can be difficult. There's a lot of workarounds you have to get good at. You have to, and I'm saying if you want to really get good at the class, you don't have to do all this, but if you want to get good at the class, you must get good at reflecting, knowing when to air blast and when not to, and don't panic. Everybody does it. I'm saying don't. Everybody's going to do it. You have to know movement, but everybody needs to know movement. That's nothing special. Learning how to crouch jump as any class is what you need to do. You need to have map knowledge. Pyro without situational awareness and map knowledge is especially vulnerable because unlike every other class, he has no way in his primary slot to increase his range outside of the Dragon's Fury. Mm-hmm. And the Dragon's Fury increases your damage approximately 25% over, I can't remember. I can remember stats. It's about 25%. You get 80% extra range. You still have air blast, but it's gimped fairly in my opinion. And the real part of getting over Pyro is just being in a game where everyone is statted a different way than you are. And that's kind of what I like. I like the challenge. I like the general applicability, like I said. I like the idea of knowing that, generally speaking, unless you're, fill-in-the-blank sniper player that plays on the cliff on upward, then I'm just going to air blast you. But other than that, stuff like that, I like how Pyro can be applied so many different places, and his deceptive depth on things like precision mechanics and map knowledge and game awareness, stuff like that. Hopefully that made sense.
You know what, that actually makes perfect sense. Yeah, heavy is especially limited. I think that's a good segue to, of course, the last question. You made a lot of good points. What do you think should be done to heavy to have others actually want to play him more, to have him be more of like a chosen class, to, have him maybe not be fully on par with Pyro, but make him, have him be mechanically similar to Pyro? What do you think should be done to the heavy class to have him fit some of like the criteria in your eyes?
Well, this is probably going to be a controversial take.
That's fine. We're all
maybe
about
not
controversy. In fact, the whole point of this podcast is to get as many viewpoints as possible.
But in my opinion, because TF2 predominant amount of people that play the game play casual, and in my opinion, for the most part, there are exceptions, but for the most part, the game should be balanced around casual. I think in casual, heavy is fine. I think the reason most people don't pick him is because people often get bored of playing him because of his mechanical simplicity and lack of variety in playstyle based on his weapons rather than player choice. And that's one of those things that, in my opinion, like with every other game, because in other games, this isn't seen as much of an issue. Like, everybody's going to hate me for saying this. In Overwatch, I used to play it. I don't play it anymore. I stopped playing it a while ago. But in Overwatch, the whole idea of the game was, I played back when they didn't have class limits, roll queue, they didn't have all that other stuff. And whenever the game was going on, you switched classes based on what your team needed. And so some people want to play heavy as something heavy isn't. Some people want to play heavy when he's not needed. If you just want to play heavy, it's casual. Just do whatever you want. It's casual. If you want to optimize stuff, or if you want to play competitive, you have to realize that heavy either may not be needed at that time. That's just the way it is. Sometimes you just don't need heavy. Sometimes you have 3, or sometimes it's at a part of the map or game mode or something like that where either someone else would be better off playing him, or your team just doesn't need it, or you may not be a heavy player. And, you know, I tell people when they're new to TF2, when there's a break-in period, everybody knows first little bit of time you play TF2, it's like, oh, this is so awful. Well, here's what you do all this, and you teach them the ins and outs of the game, because TF2 tutorials suck. But, I mean, when it comes to playing heavy, my opinion, he's fine as is for the most part. Like every class, he has bugs. Like every class, he has things that are underpowered and overpowered, although I wouldn't argue the overpowered as much. But other than like minor bug fixes and stat changes, I think heavy largely is fine, and I think he's an integral part of the game, being the face of TF2, even though Soldier and Scout and all those other classes like Pyro and Sniper are picked more. I think there's a reason heavy is the way he is. And balance-wise, in my opinion, he fits a niche that I appreciate.
Well, those are some wise words. I definitely would agree somewhat with the heavy's not always necessary. Heavy is more like one of those fun classes. When it comes to, I know you're from more of a competitive standpoint, since you've delved more into competitive, right? Yeah. But yeah, I do appreciate some of the points. I will agree. Yeah, I will definitely agree with Heavy's niche. He doesn't have the biggest of niches, although he's a good placeholder, as I was taught back in my early days. Um, I don't have much other questions to ask for right now, so I'll actually let you say a few more of your thoughts about just the overall balance between both Pyro and Heavy before we wrap this thing up. This was quite a long interview too, so.
Okay. Well, I don't have too much. My idea on Pyro and Heavy, the same thing like I said. However, balance-wise, I want to preface this. If Gorilla Jones ever puts in the picture I sent him my hours, that's because of ways I like to play. Preface this, even though scouts are annoying, I love you too. Every class has a niche in this game that I enjoy. I do like to play every class every so often. I just have more like to play others. So just understand that first of all. Pyro, my opinion on Pyro compared to Heavy. They're different because Heavy, design-wise, is decided to fill a certain amount of niches very well. Even when compared to other classes.
Absolutely.
Pyro is designed to not fit any niche super tightly. And that is why, in my opinion, although I guess technically to the disadvantage of Pyro, but I think balance-wise is mostly fine, Pyro is debatably, besides Spy, the weakest class in the game. Do I have an issue with that? No. Do I think Pyro has its flaws mechanically? Yes. Do I think they're an imperative fix now, this class sucks? Well, no. We want to talk about that. We want to talk about the pre-2016 Degreaser, pre-Jungle Inferno Flames and Air Blast. Then, this would be a different story, but we're beyond that, and they're fixed mostly, and they do fine. Heavy is, like I said, very specialized. That's what I like about him. He does certain jobs very well. He does take, in an environment where you're playing against more skilled people, it takes to make Heavy shine as the backbone or spine or anchor of the team to show. It takes more coordination. But even then, Heavy can still be very valuable, and often is. And the way I look at him is the same way like my brother, or specifically this one competitive player, I can't remember his name. He supposedly made it all the way from newcomer division in RGL, which is the lowest, all the way up to invite, which is the highest, only using, on offense and defense, on every official map that was in the rotation, the Brass Beast. And if you have used the brass piece for an extended period of time and didn't just immediately throw it away to pick up the Tomislav, you'll understand how impressive that is, because he actually did well. It's not like his team carried him all the time. Even though it's competitive, sometimes you're going to have bad days. So my opinion on heavy is that of reflecting my brother, the Black Knight, and as well as that heavy, that treat heavy less so like an equipment dolly, an equipment backpack, and more so like you're playing a game of chess with the rest of the enemy team, and each team member is a certain piece on that chessboard. And the map is the different chessboards you will use. And that's the way I kind of like to approach it. And I have my fair share of moments where I play heavy, and then I die a bunch, and then I go, I don't want to play heavy anymore. But everybody does with every class. And I made fun of soldiers earlier. I still play soldier. I still have 200 hours on them. I still spend a shit ton of time in Jump Academy. So I don't hate soldiers, although a lot of soldiers can be annoying. So that's not fault of the nice ones. But in summary, those are my closing thoughts. The classes overall, TF2 is balanced overall pretty well. It has its flaws. People like to point it out, but that's just because they have nothing else to point out. And that's because most everything else is okay. I mean, you have examples like the poor old Bison, and you have examples like the Vaccinator. But, I mean, those are the easy ones. And those are the more specified ones. Everything else is fine, in my opinion, and I like the way we're at now. I think people are too focused on heavy and changing him to be more like other games that like Call of Duty or Battlefield, and I feel like those are the people that probably need to go touch grass a bit and maybe go back to those games, because TF2 is not that game. If you want to play that game, those games exist. You can already go do that. And this isn't me saying, oh, don't touch TF2, leave it alone. No. For the most part, touch TF2 or change it where it needs to be changed. Leave it alone. Don't fix what is broken. Or don't fix what is not broken. TF2 is fine. Don't turn heavy into this fat scout Call of Duty playing Gen Z femboy guy. Okay? It's fine. It's well, I don't say that with malice. I'm actually friends with a lot of people who call themselves femboys. That's not that. It's just that generally tends to be the place where I hear that opinion. So leave heavy alone. He fits a niche fine. You want to play that certain kind of way, either look at other classes, like Scout, often fits that description, or play another game, because that game already exists. A lot of them are free to play, and they do what you want. And so those are probably my closing words.
All right. Okay. Well, I guess I'll leave it out for here right now. First of all, Concord, thank you so much for coming on. These are just two closing questions that I ask. Usually, I ask for, the heavy mains as well. Best song to listen to or best song genre you listen to while you pub stomp. Go.
Okay. Me, I listen to a wide range of music, although not consistently. My personal poison of choice is usually heavy metal, usually within the metalcore or thrash metal genre. That's my personal opinion. Okay. Doom music always works well, but yeah.
All right. It's a repeating genre I heard from our previous interviewee, Frankium, but okay. And you know what? I'll leave that question for another time. This was a question I was literally going to ask Stock versus Tommy, but I feel like it's not really much of your business to answer that.
Oh, well, I mean, I can answer it, but just to preface it, I am not a heavy main. However, I have more hours on heavy than many people who are staunch advocates of one or the other. So I'll just say that. You can ask me if you want, but I'll just say that.
All right, well, Stock versus Tommy Slav.
So it depends on how you approach it. Balance-wise, they are different, although only slightly. They're both effective. You can use both, and you'll be just about as effective as either one. The range difference on Tommy is not as big as people think. Statistically been tested. No, not referencing Big Joey. That's a flawed test. And my opinion on both is they're both fine. They both have great Australiums. You can put skins on both. You can put unusuals on both. They both look great. I usually, because I earned an Aussie in MVM of the minigun, I use that generally more often. However, I do have two strange Tomislavs. I have an Aussie and a Ironwood strange, so it's not as if I don't use it. But I just prefer to use the stock minigun, and if I tell new heavies to play heavy, I'll usually tell them use stock minigun just because Tomislav is easier to use than stock. This is true. It's objectively true. So it can develop bad habits with certain players. Certain people will never have an issue. And for like learning to train your aim as heavy, Tomislav is better because it does have tighter spread, and it is weaker up close because of his fire rate. So it is good for that. However, I would argue that in most situations you will encounter in casual, use what you want. However, if you want to optimize it, look at your situation and understand what ranges you're engaging at. If it's medium range and you're not having to worry about pressure from the sniper, you can use the argument of going to Brass Beast if you're not moving a lot, or Tomislav if you are. But usually in casual, I find myself engaging under the distance of the length of the 2-4 bridge. And in that scenario, I generally find minigun more useful. Results may vary. People are different. They like different things, and I don't care. I get an issue whenever people argue one is superior over the other, which is factually untrue. If only, yeah, maybe one is slightly better, but they're practically the same. Just let people use what they want to use. That's my thoughts.
This is exactly what I need to hear. In all the 9 episodes that I have made, of course 4 of them are up on my YouTube page, I have not heard a single person who has said both. In all my 8, 9 episodes, yeah, I've not heard a single person that has said both. You are a first. And this is coming from a Pyro main, which is actually fair game, I guess. Right. I'm going to say one more time, Concord, thank you for taking your time to do this interview with me. All right. I hope you have an amazing day. And, yeah, keep stomping. Stay humble.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
No worries.
I'm always happy to come back if you ever have me.
Absolutely. See you around, man.